All right, Serious and Silliness Outcast. This is going to be one of my favorites because I've been trying to get somebody from this world on my show. And today I have author Gabe Morales, who wrote this book. We will be discussing this book, The History of the Aryan Brotherhood. Gabe, what's happening, man? Thank you for coming on.
All right. Thank you for having me on.
Of course, no problem. So why don't you just give us a little bit of your background and what led you to be an author?
Well, I was born in Washington State, and the Northwest is home to the Aryan nations. There's, I recall quite a few white supremacists growing up, and there was also outlaw bikers. Banditos were real big in Western Washington. Actually, was born in Central Washington. We had another biker group called the Ghost Riders, who was pretty big at one time. Um, like I said, there was a lot of separatists. There was the Silent Brotherhood, who had a lot of members out of Washington State, out of the Northwest. In fact, their trial was there in Seattle in federal court. So it was just something that I grew up around. I grew up around, Mexican gangs, black gangs, Asians, Pacific Islanders, Native American, and of course, most of those people, 99%, are good people. It's that
Mhm.
1% that I always found kind of fascinating. And I think Americans do also. That's why they watch so many of these, gang movies and
Oh, they love it.
gang
Absolutely.
shows and, The
Yeah.
Sopranos and everything.
They
Yeah,
love it.
it's an
You know,
interesting topic.
my podcast, the best views I get are the biker guys, the mafia guys. People absolutely love it. There's something about men that love the underworld of power. And here's the funny part. It's not the same for serial killers. Women are mostly into serial killers. And if you notice, the majority of serial killer podcasts are by women, but gangsters and bikers, men. It's the strangest thing, but it's the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of us may be thought about living that lifestyle and thank God didn't. But I know me personally, there are several times in my life that critical incidents happened and critical decisions were made by me. Luckily, I made good decisions. I ended up joining the Marine Corps. As a young man, I started getting into some trouble, some drug issues, some alcohol issues. I was more of a lover than a fighter, but it was as a young man, you're challenged a lot in America.
Absolutely.
It started it started probably around 10 years old. I started getting bullied and challenged and
You know,
called racial names.
oh yeah, you know what's funny is that I think I'm Gen X. I would assume you're a boomer. Is that accurate? Those two generations, I think, are probably the last generations that went through serious bullying because I went through the same thing. The only thing was I grew up, I'm Italian and I grew up mostly in an Italian neighborhood. So it wasn't a racial thing, it was just a bullying thing, you know? I remember in grade school getting into fights, into junior high school getting into fights all the time. Not all the time, but you know, more than the young guys do today, put it that way.
Well, the
It, it,
big
it
thing
was
today
it
is
was normal.
cyberbullying.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, it
Yeah,
was it was
yeah,
normal
that's
back
worse.
then.
Yeah,
Yeah. It
yeah.
was normal
To get
back
a
then.
bloody nose was common to
Yeah.
get street fights, and
Yeah.
if somebody, well, at least during the my era, during the '60s and '70s, if somebody pulled out a gun, that was actually pretty rare. But putting them up, going head up, fist fights were common all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, a lot of these kids are just too quick to pull the trigger over the slightest insult or perceived insult. A lot of
Yeah.
times, there's not even a intentional insult and attack, verbal attack or physical attack, and they just shoot somebody because they think
Yeah.
maybe they were going to do something.
Yeah. It has split, right? Where when we were growing up, boomers and Gen X, the black guys, the white guys, and Spanish guys were all as tough as each other, right? And now it has split. The white population has gone more toward um uh teaching that violence is no good, right? And a lot of these white kids don't know what it's like to grow up in a violent area. But the black population is still becoming very violent, and with the new um, left-leaning democratic laws that are in place in inner cities, it's gotten even worse. Like I know in New York, you have it is not considered robbery if you steal something under $1,000. So they go in there and loot and take it and steal. And it's like going pouring gasoline on the fire, and there's this split happening. Um, so it's tremendous how when we were growing up, you saw, like you said, there was Spanish, black, white, and my generation too, and even the neighborhoods were split up. But now it is really kind of gotten divided. Don't get me wrong. There's still some tough white guys out there. You just take a look at the UFC, right? But as a whole, it's kind of gotten like, it's completely different, going in opposite directions. So I
Yeah.
apologize. So
Well,
go
there's
right
definitely
ahead.
been a lot of changes. Like I said, a lot of fist fights. You get a bloody nose, you clean it up, and you live another day.
That's
My
it.
best friend, we got into a fight in 1974 at the Ballard Boys Club at a dance because we had two females that were dancing with me and my brother, and we didn't know it, but their boyfriends were also these other two guys. And so we started fighting over the girls, duking it out during the dance, right? Taking it outside, duking it out, getting bloody and everything, and then finding out that the girls intervened. Wait, do Gabe, Joe, stop. And we're like, wait,
Yeah.
these guys? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It's always over a
okay.
girl.
So we ditched the girls and we became best friends, both of us. Me and my brother and him and his brother became lifetime best friends. And we started off, like I said, just fighting, but we let it go, and we found out we had a lot in common, became bonded.
No, that is male traits. I mean, that is masculine traits to the fullest. When somebody defends themselves to you, you gain respect for them. And then you're like, okay, this guy's like me. I could hang out with him, and you actually build a bond. You wouldn't, if somebody would have backed down, you would have never been friends.
Right. Yeah, wouldn't have respected them. Yeah.
Yeah, right. All right, so continue. So go right ahead.
Excuse me.
No, go ahead. So you will join the Marine Corps.
Oh yes. Okay. Yeah. So go. Yeah, we got a little sidetracked there. Sorry.
That's okay. It happens all
And
the
and
time.
my at my age, almost 65. Excuse me. Sometimes I lose my train of thought. But yeah, I joined the Marine Corps. I had some Mexican mafia guys gunning for me, and it was another occasion where it was a fight. Another occasion where my brother was there, and the problem was I told, it was my 21st birthday party. I told my brother and his crew no guns. I wanted it to be a peaceful occasion and everything, nice time. Didn't want no drama, and so they did. They abided by my wishes. And usually my brother and his crew were strapped. They were bona fide gang members. I was never a gang member. I
Right.
was what I guess you could call associate. I knew a lot of drug dealers, gang members, pimps, etc. But I never was one. I just
Hmm.
knew, they were in the neighborhood. And so these guys crashed my 21st birthday party. My brother and his crew basically challenged them, said, hey, you guys want some problems? They said, hey, yeah, there is a problem. You guys stay right here. We'll be right back. And I knew they were going to get their guns, and they shot up the birthday party. Shot my
Jesus.
brother's best friend. He lost his leg.
Wow.
It was just a really bad situation, but they didn't stop there. My brother was in jail um, at that time, and they kept on gunning for me, and I actually was given a gun by a gang in Yakima, a rival gang, and said, you need to handle your business. And I was like, no, I never pulled a trigger at anybody in anger in my life. I pulled triggers, but never in anger on anybody, and I wasn't
Right.
about to do that then. I was pretty good. They said fighter when I had to be, didn't like to, but would if I had to, and it was. situation basically I felt was kill or be killed. And I didn't like either one of those
Yeah,
choices.
really.
Ended up joining the
Yeah.
Marine Corps.
Ah, good.
So I was like, hey, I joined the biggest gang. Look at me now.
Yeah,
So
right.
that was a critical decision. That's what I mean. That's an example of a critical incident, critical decision in my life. And thank God I made the right one, I feel, because it made me a better man, got me more disciplined. It catapulted my career into corrections and law enforcement. And here I am today, a live man, not in prison, not addicted to drugs, none of that stuff that happened to a lot of people I knew.
Yeah, well, that the service definitely is a good out for that. I know plenty of people, guys that I've worked with, guys that I admired that joined the service and it changed them. It's a lot of times, guys from the inner cities, they don't have discipline, they don't have a father figure, they don't know what it is like to be responsible or to unite together as one. So it teaches you a lot of life lessons. The only problem is, if there's a war the first one's there. But other than that, does teach you a lot. Now, today, but okay, before we get started, actually, I gotta do a shout out for one of my sponsors. Okay, Gabe, you got to get yourself one of these shirts. I don't know if you work out or if you do anything physical. These are one of those shirts that like a sweat proof, and it's called Beer League Warriors Apparel. And you go on Instagram, and it's a Beer League Warriors Apparel. Then you're going to be able to get them in October, but you could put orders in now. And, it's a small company. So instead of buying a Nike shirt or an Adidas shirt, put your money into small business and go to Instagram, Beer League Warriors Apparel. Because right after this, I'm going to the gym. I already drank my pre-workout, and I'm going to be wearing my new shirt from Beer League Warriors Apparel. And there you have it. Okay, now we're going to get to the Aryan Brotherhood. And this is a subject that I've really kind of gone down the rabbit hole. I think it started um, with the interview of Michael Thompson on Vlad TV about a year, maybe 2 years ago, because he was a former shot caller in the Aryan Brotherhood. And then, I started watching documentaries, and then I came across your book not too long ago, maybe about a month ago or so. And I wanted to like find somebody who really knew a lot about it because I didn't know this, but there's a difference between the Aryan Nation and the Aryan Brotherhood. But today we're going to get into that, right? Because the little bit that I know about the Aryan Brotherhood, and correct me if I'm wrong, it started in around 1968 in San Quentin prison. And from what I understand, there were white groups before the Aryan Brotherhood, but they were like maybe neo-Nazis, and they weren't very organized. And they were, from the little bit of interviews that I've seen from Michael Thompson and some other documentaries, the Aryan Brotherhood was formed when the neo-Nazis weren't organized, and the black gangs and Spanish gangs would really go after them, and other white guys in the prison were getting hurt that weren't part of the neo-Nazi gangs, and they really weren't stepping up to do anything. So the Aryan Brotherhood actually formed to defend themselves against the black gangs, Hispanic gangs, Mexican mafia. But from what I understand, a little bit that I do know, from what I understand, what they lack in numbers, they make up in veracity. The little bit that I do know, that they basically don't want just anybody. They need you to be as lethal and as vicious as possible, and as intelligent as possible, so that they could dominate with intelligence and force, since they don't have the numbers like the black gangs and the Hispanic gangs. Am I accurate so far?
You're pretty accurate. Just one correction.
Good.
They are, and you always get differences of opinion, but as far as we know, California Department of Corrections documented them going back to early 1967 when
Okay.
a white inmate named Robert Halderman was killed at San Quentin by the blacks. And you're correct. Before that time, there were various groups, Diamond Tooth Gang, the Nazis, the Bluebirds, etc. These different cliques made up of whites were around, but they weren't real unified. And the Aryan Brotherhood basically became the number one prison gang then in the system, and still are today.
Hmm.
The initial intent was to protect younger white convicts when they came in the system and hook them up with, a care kit, hygiene items, canteen, that type of stuff before they could get to the store, welcome them into the system and back them up if they got to friction with the other races and other prison gangs. However, it's very interesting to me that all these prison gangs and even street gangs mostly prey on their own people. Aryan Brotherhood mostly kills other whites,
Mm-hmm.
although they've had beefs with Hispanic gangs and black gangs. The main victims are other whites and other white convicts in the system. The Mexican gangs mostly hit their own. The black gangs mostly clean house and kill their own. It's really interesting how they all profess to have white power or Mexican power or black
Mm-hmm.
power, yet they mostly hurt their own. And the same thing with the street gangs. It's very interesting to me that the hype doesn't add up to the reality.
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. And the same thing with the Italian mafia. They basically kill themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's the truth. And you're right. And bikers are the same kind of thing. But why is that? Is that to keep law and order intact? Or is it just it's just loosey goosey? If you screw up, you screw up, and killings just become normal.
Well, I think a lot of it is for interdiscipline to make the members think that, hey, if I even think about leaving, these guys might slaughter me, just butcher
Mhm.
me. So it does instill discipline that way. And it worked a lot better when the systems, the prisons and jails back in those days were not built with security in mind. They were built to prevent guys from escaping, and they still escaped.
Mm. Yeah,
You hardly ever hear about escapes today. I worked at a jail, and the majority of the escapes were released by accident, but they call them escapes. They
really.
cut the guy loose. I remember a couple of times the guy saying, "Yeah, are you sure?" And like, yeah, yeah, you're done. Get out of here. They kick him out the door, and then they find out, whoops, this guy,
Wrong guy.
he's
You
doing
released
some
the
time.
wrong guy.
Then they chalk it down as escape. A lot of people don't know that, but
That's
a lot of
hysterical.
times you hear in the paper about this guy escaped. That's what happened.
That's
Or
amazing.
he
Well,
walked away from work release, and didn't come back, and came back an hour late. He escaped. But
yeah, right, right,
anyways,
right. That's unbelievable. Well, the most popular one around here, because I live in Jersey now, grew up in New York, was upstate New York, where I believe it was Ganamora. Was that the name of the prison? Where the two guys, I think that's the name of the prison. It was upstate New York, very close to Canada, and there were two guys. They were both having an affair with one of the women that were working at the prison, and with her help, they were able to escape.
yeah,
I
yeah,
forgot.
that's common too.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah. That is
Yeah,
that is
unfortunately, yeah,
that is very common where you see prisoners sleeping with the female guards. It's or as far as I'm concerned, like female guards should work in the female prisons. Like, why you let that possibility
yeah. Well,
happen?
there's a lot of people who feel that way, and there's pros and cons. I worked with some really good female officers at Folsom Prison that
Mm.
de-escalated things when, it was like a testosterone contest between the guard and the convict because
Oh.
they're males, where a female would come in and intervene, be more like a mother figure and come
Ah.
to knock it off. So, yeah, I think if they're to me, it matters if mostly if you are, whether you're female or male, whether you're made of the right stuff.
Hmm.
And it's not a job for everybody, but they will find, whether you're male or female, they will find your weakness. So they will see a female if she is uh, can be compromised
Mm.
through manipulation very quick. They test you very quick. In fact,
Mm.
I used to tell the recruits at the academy, you get tested by your department and you're going to get tested by the inmate population right at the gate. They're going to find out what you're made of. And if you're a jerk, you're overbearing, they're going to find that out too, that they can push your buttons real easy and then go do something else while you're focused on, you have tunnel
Ah.
vision on this over here. they'll
Right.
they'll they'll work that to their advantage. Or if you're weak and soft, they will compromise you to get you to bring in stuff, etc. It starts with a little small favor, and it goes from there. It goes into bigger favors until basically they own you.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's an interesting field. Definitely, not everybody should go into it. And there's like I said, there's pros and cons of people working in any field. I think
Hmm.
you have to be the right fit for
Right.
the job. That's what I'm saying. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I had two questions about that. Then we'll get back onto the book and the Aryan Brotherhood. But it's just sometimes I do an interview and I find out that there are certain things that are just that much more interesting. The first question is, how did you separate dealing with, because you were in Folsom and that's a serious prison, right? And that's where
Mhm.
serious convicts go. How did you deal with that? How did you separate it from home life, family life, to going every day and dealing with those high risk criminals?
Well, that's a good question. Um, I'm presently working on a book with David Contreras, post traumatic stress disorder. He was a police officer and corrections officer, and we're focusing on these mass school shootings. It is really hard to explain sometimes when you're in that field. For instance, things would happen. I'd see a guy getting gutted right in front of me
Hmm.
with a shank, his guts hanging out. He's holding his
Oh,
guts in, or somebody gassing me or a fellow officer, which means putting pieces of urine in a cup and throwing it on you. And
Jesus.
at that time, this was really when AIDS was first coming out. People, we got scared. You get
Sure.
poked with a needle or something, or you have body fluids. And it's still a concern today, but back then it was even more freaked out because people didn't even know what AIDS was. It was like the boogeyman.
Right.
And so I would come home and I wouldn't tell, I couldn't talk to my wife about that. I didn't want her to get worried about me. So
Right.
I boxed it in. The only way I talked to was fellow officers.
Mm.
And I almost got caught up into what a lot of officers unfortunately get caught up in. And we used to call it choir practice. After work, you go drink some beers. There's a
Right.
bar literally right outside the gate. And we go there and we de escalate and debrief there and talk about our day. But I found out that it could really get you worked up and make you very, very bitter and just, not make you a really nice person. I saw a lot of anger in those conversations, complaining about the administration, and rightly so, especially today. It's even worse than it was back then.
Hmm.
But certain administrators or certain, supervisors that wouldn't back you up, for instance, and people would kind of solve their problems with alcohol, and
Ah, yeah.
that wasn't a really good way to deal with that stuff.
Hmm.
So that stuff builds up in a lot of officers. It's post traumatic stress disorder, just like the things I seen at Folsom was like doing combat. We mentioned if you might have to go into combat if you're the military and possibly be killed. Well, every day I didn't know if I was going to come back, so I had the same pressures on me. And anybody who says that they go into a prison or jail and is not scared, to me, is an idiot,
Yeah,
because you
yeah,
should be scared. Fear is
absolutely.
good if you know how to control it.
Hmm.
You don't risk safety and security. You're always aware of your surroundings. You're always where your backup is. You're you can't whoop them all.
Hmm.
I was out there sometimes just me and my partner and 800 convicts, 800 of California's worst, and you have to learn really good communication skills to survive out there.
I can only
Uh,
imagine. Jesus.
yeah, yeah, and you have to really be sharp, or yeah, you're gonna get hurt, maybe not come back. So it was definitely affecting me. Um, I think I dealt with it better after I left Folsom and started working at the King County Jail in Seattle.
Hmm.
And I worked in classification, more of a counselor capacity. So I was actually able to deal with it a lot better with convicts coming to me because I was not in uniform, so it was less of an adversary type of role,
Uh,
and I would get them into programs, and it would make me feel good. I guess it was that was a good therapy for me to get certain people into drug rehab programs or into work training or life skills programs, GD programs. There's a lot of programs in there, not enough, but a lot of stuff that inmates can do to improve their lives.
oh, that's
So I
good.
would talk to them about their how they got there and what they saw for their future. And unfortunately, especially the younger ones didn't see no future. They saw their
Yeah.
future being locked up and dealing dope and pimping girls and that kind of stuff. And I tried to get them to question themselves, um, and see that there was potential for them for change.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of how I dealt with it. But yeah, initially, yeah, I didn't deal with it very good. I dealt with it, I think, in a negative way, and
Right.
I kind of turned that around, and I've since been doing that, talking to people like on my podcast, like you have,
Right.
and try to share those experiences and in situations where I made bad decisions and I didn't know if I'd make it out, But
Sure.
hopefully, I do that not to glorify that world or just tell war stories, but hopefully that people learn lessons from my experiences, the good and bad.
Right. 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 Um, I had another question, but I'm going to save it for later. I really want to get into the book you wrote, The Aryan Brotherhood. What is the difference between the Aryan Brotherhood and the Aryan Nation?
Okay, well, the Aryan Nations actually started by Richard Butler. He was a reverend of the Church of Jesus Christ. I can't remember. He was considered himself to be Christian, but he was definitely Aryan, neo-Nazi type of beliefs, and
Hmm.
his church was located in Hayden Lake, Idaho,
Hmm.
uh, not too far from the Washington State border there in Idaho, Sandpoint, I believe. And so he started a whole movement, and it was a uh, neo-Christian, neo-Nazi movement for whites. And the Silent Brotherhood, in fact, was a spinoff group. People can watching this podcast can look them up.
Hmm.
Silent Brotherhood or Bruderschweigen, really big group back in the 1970s, uh, militant group, anti-government militia that
Hmm.
did a lot of stuff, and they also killed I believe, a gay Jewish radio broadcaster in Denver. And they weren't just isolated to Idaho and Washington; they're all over the United States now, even today.
Really?
And yes, so they're still around. They got sued. He had I believe, a security officer who fired upon a lady and her son, as I recall, and they sued the Aryan Nations and basically was able to get a forfeiture of that property and any assets they had. So, but they still went on, even though they didn't have their headquarters there. They still went on. Aryan Brotherhood, like I said, started in the late 1960s in the California prison system. So,
Hmm.
totally different things. It's very common for people to get them mixed up. There are Aryan Brotherhood members or supporters of the Aryan Nations, and there's Aryan Nation supporters who are Aryan Nation believers or followers who support the Aryan Brotherhood.
Hmm.
However, like I said, there's a lot of competition with these we call hate groups, white supremacist groups, which I think is kind of interesting too, because we never call them gangs, but they often, like Silent Brotherhood, they are gangs or organizations, criminal organizations.
Yeah, right.
They can be.
So
So
the
that's
Aryan,
the big,
that's
yeah,
the
that's a
big
big
difference
difference.
between the two. Okay. How did the Aryanhood, I apologize, how did the Aryan Brotherhood, uh, at first, how did they combat against the Mexican gangs and the black gangs? And how did they organize so well? What's the difference between, because from what I gather, they're extremely organized, they're extremely feared, and they even operate outside of the prison system. How did they get so organized? and with less numbers in order to battle other gangs like the Mexican mafia or the what is it, the gorilla black gorilla
Black
uh
Royal family.
black gorilla family. I apologize. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, they are very violent. They're very small. It's believed, like in the California and federal prison system, which there is a Aryan Brotherhood branch in the California Department of Corrections and in the federal system. There's Aryan Brotherhood gangs in almost every state now.
Mm,
However, they're not affiliated with the California branch, and they're not respected as well in the Bureau of Prison system, the federal system. Some
mm.
people disagree with that, especially other white Aryan gangs or Aryan Brotherhood gangs from other states. But the ABs from California and the federal BOP, very small number. We're talking 50, maybe 60 members. That's
Really?
it, that
Wow.
are controlling tens of thousands of white convicts in the prison system. So, yeah, a lot of people wonder that. How do they do that? Extreme violence
Mm,
and fear. So they have a lot of associates, although we're talking members, 50, 60 made members. They have hundreds of more associates
hmm.
in gangs like the Nazi lowriders who did their bidding, Public Enemy number one who did their bidding. There's a whole bunch of new ones out there. Fresnex from Fresno now that do their bidding. So they'll use a lot of these dirty white boys in the prison system. Federal prison system has done their bidding. Um, so on and off, they've had good relations with a lot of these lesser groups. Some of these groups decided that, hey, we don't need the Aryan Brotherhood. We're doing all the work. You guys are all locked up in the hole. We're out here on the main lines putting in the work. We're going to do
Mm.
our own thing. The Nazi lowriders is a good example of that. They had a
Really?
branch called F the Brotherhood. And
Really?
yeah, they actually put on, yeah, like the Shamrock and FDB over it, which is the
Wow.
symbol. Shamrock's a symbol of the ABs, which I have on the cover of that book you showed.
That's right.
They That's their official symbol, and they basically own that, and they take that very serious if you are rocking that shamrock
Right.
without authorization. So they will viciously slaughter people. Barry Mills, I was on the biography channel, and it showed on other channels too. But biography channel was the original one that showed it, and it was called Baron of the Brotherhood. It was about Barry Mills. Barry Mills was considered the number one guy for the Aryan Brotherhood, and when he was at Atlanta, when he got sent from the California system to the federal system, he wanted to send a message to the other whites, and he almost decapitated this one guy. He butchered him.
Wow.
The guy that was standing guard for him even was freaking out. Like, oh my God, this guy's a maniac.
Yeah.
I just heard an interview recently by a DC Black shot caller, and DC Blacks and Aryan Brotherhood had a bloody war in the federal system. But this guy said he respected Barry Mills because he knew he's sharp, he's smart. He's violent. He also was very intelligent, very cunning. And he would see Barry Mills all dressed in white. And so he asked Barry Mills, "Hey, what's up with wearing all white? I know you're a white cat, but why why are you flying all white?" He goes, "Well,
Yeah.
I work in the butcher shop," and that's when he clicked. He would go home every day with blood on his clothes, and so nobody would even notice that that was an issue. So when he
Wow.
slaughtered these guys, he used that to his advantage, or thought he'd use that to his advantage. That people thought, hey, he was just coming home from work, back to his cell from work. And so
Wow.
this guy, I remember this DC Black saying, "This guy's a genius.
Yeah,
He's
really.
an evil genius." But yeah, who would think of something like that? You have to be a maniac to even think that way.
That's
But
unbelievable. Now, because
yeah,
when you think of prison, you think of Shanks, and how did he have the means to almost decapitate somebody?
yeah. I can't remember. I don't know that that particular weapon was ever found as evidence, but if they can't get one from the kitchen, from the directly from the kitchen, which is supposed to be controlled.
Mhm.
You're supposed to have a tool board, and they have an outline, just like a lot of guys do in their garage. And you're
Right.
supposed to go back up there when you're done with it, and they're numbered and everything. But If they can't get one, steal one, they'll make one. The prison industries, where these guys go to work, a lot of times they have metal shop equipment where
Hmm.
they'll hone something down, or even just they'll go into their cells. Believe it or not, their beds are made out of metal, and they will take the the sprinkler. What they would do at Folsom is they would take the sprinklers and pop those, get those to
Hmm.
pop off, and then use the sprinkler head, the little. It's almost like a little song. It's a
I know
little
what you're talking
circle.
about. It's like a star.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and they would take that piece and go through the bedding, which was uh, not a strong metal, and cut out a shank within a couple hours, and then sharpen it on the floor. And it was usually take them about a day, and they got a shank anywhere they can. They would melt down their cups and roll them real tight and make into a plastic shank, which is even better because now you can go through a metal detector
Wow.
without it going off. Yeah, you would put ray. Another common one was a razor. They're supposed to have, especially in the because most of these guys are in the whole isolation, administrative segregation, but they would steal the razor from their razor they're given. It's supposed to be given back to the officer then after they shower. So they'd take it out, and or an officer not paying attention, they'd take the razor out, then they'd embed it into a toothbrush
Hmm.
and use that as a slashing weapon. That was probably one of the bigger weapons I would see. Um, does a lot of damage. Doesn't always kill a guy unless they hit the jugular, but a guy people just bleed real bad. Well, if you ever shave, you nick yourself, you bleed
Sure.
real
Yeah.
bad. So
Absolutely.
so even if maybe it wasn't deadly, it was a bloody scene and intimidating, and everybody'd see that. And so they were the Aryan Brotherhood in particular were very good weapons makers. They had guys who specialized in that.
Really.
And so, yeah, they were able to control the system, control the other whites, and keep the other prison gangs and other races off them through extreme violence. And another thing that a lot of people don't always understand, even though they call themselves the Aryan Brotherhood, they would do deals with the Southern Mexicans or Mexican Mafia,
Hmm.
and they had an alliance. And a lot of times the Aryan Brotherhood do hits for them, and they get paid in heroin a
Really.
lot of times. So I said on the a lot of people they tell me they laugh on that Baron of the Brotherhood special. I said that they shouldn't have called themselves the Aryan Brotherhood. They should have called themselves the Heroin Brotherhood
Yeah.
because most of them are junkies. Yeah, they're
Wow.
addicted to heroin. They come out of their cells 23-hour lockdown looking like vampires, addicted to heroin.
Wow.
Big heroin users, most of them.
Now, because they're so violent, do any of them ever get out of prison? I mean, I could imagine that if they're killing in prison, they get more time put on them, right?
Yeah, well, about 10 years ago in the California system, of course, every system's different, and just like every jail is different.
Hmm.
But in the California prison system, they had a lawsuit by a guy named Todd Ashker, who was an Aryan Brotherhood member, very intelligent. He's what we call a prison house lawyer, uh, very good at the law, successfully sued the California Department of Corrections several times, and he sued about the security housing unit program, where basically the program they had to slam down all prison gang members, validated prison gang members. So that let out a lot of these guys about 10 years ago. It's been almost 10 years ago now.
Wow.
And
That's unbelievable. What
they
is it?
have
What is
been,
it about
yeah,
California that just it's like they're in another world when it comes to crime and laws. It's unbelievable.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it opened up the floodgates again
Yeah.
because at one time, like I said, 67 through about 1978, late 1970s, they owned, at least for the whites, the Aryan Brotherhood owned their yards that they
Hmm.
ran, that they were present on. And then in the late 70s, they started creating security housing units, dungeons basically, to put
Hmm.
these guys in 24-hour lockdown and keep them away from the population. It did greatly decrease violence
Hmm.
as they built more and more of these prisons. When I worked at New Folsom, they didn't even have Corcoran yet or Pelican Bay. But as those prisons came online, they sent more and more of these validated prison gang members there. And the violence greatly decreased.
Hmm.
When I started at New Folsom in 1987, it was mind boggling the amount of violence you would see. And it really, really went down until about 10 years ago after this decision, which basically allowed gang members to go back to general population, violent prison gang members. Now, granted, some of these guys hadn't done anything, totally changed. In fact, some of them, were not even, I would say, were probably not even in good standings anymore with their own gang, but they didn't want to debrief, which was the only way you can get out of there is basically die um, of natural causes, get killed, or debrief. They kind of had three ways they talk about. And debrief means you basically tell the cops, the prison cops, the investigators, everything you know about your gang and just spill your guts about everything. You become a snitch, a rat. And
Hmm.
a lot of these guys, even though they knew that they were not in good standings any longer with the Aryan Brotherhood or these other prison gangs, just felt that they couldn't get themselves to snitch on anybody, even if they
Right.
felt it, might save their skin. So finally, they cut a lot of these guys loose. Some of them did okay. Some of them paroled, went home, haven't been arrested since. Some of them turned Christian, reformed, totally reformed individuals.
Hmm.
But a lot of them were not. And so they just resumed control of these prison yards. And today, if you look in the newspapers and read about California, there's about a killing every week now. And staff assaults are off the hook again. Um, I had a cousin who worked at a prison in California. He just quit. He said it's just too messed up. So the convicts have retaken the system, according to a lot of staff and according to a lot of inmates. So they turn back the clock. It's not a good thing. And the federal system, it's a little different. They've had some reforms. They've cut some guys loose, especially the really old guys that haven't had any behavior problems in a long time. And maybe that's okay in certain situations. But I think you have to be really careful about how you classify. And I classified convicts for many years. Very important how you classify them, where you put them. A lot of people don't understand. Not every prison is the same. You have different units, protected custody units. They have what they had sensitive needs yards for protected custody inmates. They have uh, 50 yards. They have all these different 280 yards. They have all these 180 yards. I mean, it's all these different types of institution with different prison gangs. And back then, it was the Aryan Brotherhood, it was the Mexican Mafia, Nuestra Familia, Black Guerrilla Family, Texas Syndicate, but they kind of went away. So it was what we call the Big Four.
Hmm.
Now there's probably 40 different prison gangs running around these
Jesus.
prisons. So it's out of control. What I hear from officers still working the California system, and a lot of them just can't wait to retire or quit, is out of control. And Aryan Brotherhood is one of the major players in that.
Wow. It's just I don't understand what, because it's New York is right behind California with this leniency, and it just blows me away how they're just letting chaos occur. But so so the Aryan Brotherhood throughout the years, how were they able to establish dominance outside of the prison? Because I understand they're able to do some drug dealing and extortion and racketeering outside of prison. How did they establish the streets while being in prison?
Well, that's a good question. Again, they made a lot of alliances. A lot of people, you're from the East Coast, a lot of people are more familiar with the East Coast, Costa Nostra,
Sure.
Italian Mafia, but they had them in LA too, in other
Hmm.
parts of California and out west, just not as big. So they would make deals with them. Yeah, San Francisco had a little group of mafiosos. LA had a Cosa Nostra group. They would make deals with them with outlaw bikers. At
Hmm.
one time, they were real tight with the Hells Angels, and then Evidently, a couple ABs killed a Hell's Angel president, and that caused a lot of drama there.
Wow.
I know some of those individuals that were involved in that. Um, they will deal with, like I said, the Mexican drug cartels, the
Hmm.
Sureños, who the Mexican mafia, most of them are locked up in prison too, but they will deal with the Sureños, where they're basically followers or supporters. And so
Hmm.
they're doing a lot of the dirty work, these subgroups,
Wow.
and they will make alliances with people. They get to know who the big drug dealer is, especially if they're of their race. They
Hmm.
kind of let the Mexicans control the Mexican drug dealers, the blacks control the black drug dealers. Like I said, they mostly prey on their own. But if there's a white major drug dealer and they know about it, they're going to send one of their minions after
Right.
them. Say, hey, you know what? You got to kick down. You got to pay rent, or we'll just rob and take everything.
It's the same blueprint in every gang. It's this no matter if it there might be minor changes here and there, but everything you're telling me, the Italians have done. Right? You're like, you can't just be Italian and decide, oh, I'm gonna run a sports betting racket in out of Brooklyn, because they're gonna find out and they're gonna be like, hey, oh, you can't, you got to pay the piper. It doesn't work this way. You're in our neighborhood. It's the same shit. They all play the same game. They all have the same blueprint. They're just different races. That's all it really is. But some might be
And
more
what are you going to do?
sophisticated
How
than
you
others.
Right, right. And what are you going to do? How are you going to complain? You going to go to the cops and tell them, hey, I'm running an illegal gambling business?
Yeah,
They
right,
know you're not going to do that.
right.
Or a drug dealer, yeah, I got a bunch of kilos back here. They're trying to take it. They know
Yeah,
it's a
you got
pretty safe move on their part.
right. Yeah, you got nowhere to go. Yeah, absolutely. It's 100%. It absolutely. So as far as today, the from what you want to know, I know you've been out of the system for a while and you wrote the book several years ago. As far as today goes, is the Aryan Brotherhood still as strong as it was in the 70s and 80s throughout the federal system, the federal prison system?
I would say no. And the reason I say that is because of, again, the way they built these prisons and jails is much more secure. Back then, they were called linear prisons or jails. They would build tiers, and you couldn't even see at the end of the tier. And they would put these convicts in there. Yeah, there was usually a gunner in the higher security prisons on the gun rail walking by to make sure the officer was safe. But when the officer wasn't around, these guys pretty much doing what they want,
Mm,
sight unseen. The prisons that were built after that were called pod systems. So then there was a lot more visibility of the inmates or
mm,
convicts. Then they went to direct supervision, which is really interesting concept. We had one of those at the Regional Justice Center in Kent, Washington. And that's where the officer is actually in there with the convicts, just like I was out in the yard. So
mm,
you have to have good communication skills. It does prevent a lot of violence because there's an officer there watching them at all times and listening too.
mm,
That's the other thing. A lot of times they didn't know, but I was listening. So not only watching, but listening to conversations pick up a lot that way. In body language, in tone of voice, all that real important communication stuff. So it has changed. Usually the direct supervision now is only for low security prisons, but they still have the pod system now, which has improved security at most of the institutions now built today. They no longer use the linear type. I can't think of any new facilities that are being built that way. So
okay.
that is one big factor just in design has improved safety and security for both staff and inmates. The other thing is too is there's all these competing prison gangs today.
Hmm.
So if a guy doesn't like the Aryan Brotherhood, now he can go to another gang. And guess what? The administration may even put him in a special area so he hasn't he's claiming protected custody from the Aryan Brotherhood, but he's still running the same games that the Aryan Brotherhood was, just under a different gang.
Right.
So for the last 20 years, sensitive needs yards gangs, new or PC prison gangs, uh, were the biggest things. They were doing more violence than the Aryan Brotherhood was.
Wow.
They were out of control, and now it's interesting because now they're mixing some of these traditional prison gangs with these newer prison gangs, and now you're seeing a lot of violence. You're seeing, it's not good.
Wow.
It's a mess.
Wow. You said that there would be about 50 or 60 shot callers, and the rest of them would be associates, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
How would an associate rise to become one of the shot callers? What are the credentials?
Well, you got to put in work. So kill kill people on the hit list, and they still generate hit lists. And of course, if you take out the number one guy on the hit list, you're probably going to have what they call make your bones.
Hmm.
You're probably going to get your shamrock if you do something like that. You also can deal a lot of dope, bring in a lot of dope for them. Like I said, they're dope fiends. All the
Hmm.
leaders, or most of them, are dope fiends. So if you're bringing in heroin for years and years, they might just basically grant you access in.
Hmm.
Usually you have to kill in the Aryan Brotherhood. Um, Most of them have, but I do know a few individuals that were, and in protest from some of the other ABs that had to kill somebody. Hey, this guy's a big dope dealer and everything. We're gonna basically love him in, which is not a good situation. That's what they did with
Yeah.
the Nazi lowriders. A lot of them were just loved in. They were just, hey, brother, I like you. You're in the prison gang. Didn't have to take nobody out. That really doesn't make for a high quality type of
Right.
individual. But if the guy's a major dope dealer and he's bringing in a lot of dope, sometimes they'll let that stuff slide and say, oh well, he did. One of the head guys who sanctioned him say or sponsor him to say, well, yeah, he put in some work for us. They won't say who,
Right. 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 Right.
because really
Right.
he
Just
didn't. But oh yeah, he did a couple things for us. And who's going to question the number one or number two or number three guy?
yeah.
Um,
Once again, it's the same thing. It's the same as the Italian. It's the same crap. It like a very famous mafioso, Michael Franzese, and he's all over podcasts. He was basically he was never convicted of murder. He doesn't speak of it, but he was basically made because he made so much money. He made a ton of
right,
money and he became a boss and he had his own crew. And then there were guys that were
sure.
just straight,
And I think his
straight.
dad also was was
His
was,
father,
was
yes, yeah,
mafioso.
his father. And there were
Yeah, so
guys
they just
like,
kind of they kind of just granted him in. Yeah, we'll give him a pass.
yeah, it's the same. It's the same. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, the guy made millions of dollars, but it blows. But the more people I interview from different underworlds, it's the same process. Like I said, some might be more sophisticated than others. Some might be more difficult to get in than others, but it's the same process. If you bring in enough money, enough dope, they turn the blind eye and go, yeah, 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 he's with us, he's with us, right? Instead of abiding by
Right.
the actual rules and regulations. And there were guys in the Italian mafia, like there's a guy, a gas pipe, from the Genovese crime family, who was a psychopath. He would literally, they call him gas pipe for a reason, right? Because that was his weapon of choice. But and it's the same. It's the same thing. But
Well, like they say, don't hate the player, hate the game.
yeah, yeah, it's
It's all part of
unbelievable.
the game.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
unreal. Now, when you say get your shamrock, I'm assuming you mean a tattoo, right?
correct. Yeah,
Okay.
that shamrock they use, and that was because they're one of their first leaders, Jack Red Mahoney, was Irish,
Hmm.
and they had several Irish members uh, over the years. They just kind of adopted that as a symbol. That's one, probably their main symbol.
Okay. Now, if somebody does become a high-ranking shot caller, does become one of the 50 or 60 shot callers, is there a ceremony or it's basically, you get your shamrock, that's it, you're in?
Well, it's a process. You have to be sponsored, usually by two people. I am aware in some prison gangs where it's been just one person.
Hmm.
If they're like the number one guy, again, who's going to question him? You
Right.
know, this guy's in. I'm going almost. I'm gonna get. You're gonna be second. Yeah, you're gonna be third. Okay, I mean, they
Right.
can actually point like that. Anybody opposed?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What
So
was
it's not real democratic. It has to do a lot with power,
yeah.
control,
Hmm.
um, fear, intimidation, and so that it's basically a process. You have to put in work, usually some kind of work, whatever that is, and then you usually have to be sponsored by a couple made guys.
Hmm.
And in the prison gangs, it used to be that everybody voted on it. Um, Now sometimes you got two sponsors and that's good enough.
Right.
And people can question it later, and they do sometimes. That's where some of these killings come out of. That's where some of these little personal beefs come out of when people say, "Hey, no, wait a minute, that guy wasn't made. He didn't. We found out some dirt on him. Here's a court case where he snitched. That's real
Right.
common. Way back, it might have been when he's 15 years old, but he snitched.
No,
He
wow.
might be
Okay.
35 and even killed a couple people for us, but it don't matter. They'll try to find some dirt on him. There's a lot of jealousies, and like I said, they mostly go after each other. So they'll find some kind of reason to hate on this guy, try to
Hmm.
bring him down. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Power, how people want to fight for power, that power and
Now
control.
I'm gonna have one more question, and then I'm gonna let you go because I know it's getting a little late. But I'm also definitely want you back for the other books you wrote, but we're gonna get into that. The last question is for some of these heavy hitters, these shot callers. What was what was some of the benefits you've seen that they were able to they were able to benefit from? What were some of the spoils, if you will, of being such a high-ranking member of the Aryan Brotherhood?
Well, believe it or not, some of them seem pretty basic or simple to me or you. But for instance, I've seen several times where a major shot caller, considered one of the top guys in these prison gangs, would come into a unit and guys would start giving up their commissary, just saying, "Hey, do you need anything? You need that?" Uh,
Hmm.
they would greet them like a rock star. They would pound on the door, shout their name, kick, and say, "Right on, brother," and it's a big ego booster. Like I said, they would give them on any item they wanted. So
Mm.
the prison food is notorious, and jail food notorious for not tasting very good. So
Yeah.
they always ate pretty good.
Yeah.
Even if it was top ramen, they would get coffee, fresh coffee from these guys when they had no coffee. They would just shoot them drugs. Hey, they know he's a dope fiend. Shoot him some drugs,
Mm.
on the house, kind of thing. So once they've earned kind of that notoriety, they get a lot of free stuff. And they got, like I said, a lot of ego boosters. Everybody's basically kissing their butt.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
so that's if you're looking for that, if that's what makes you, motivates you, you're looking to be respected
Hmm.
and for everybody to fear you. Uh, that's a big thing right there. I seen that as a big motivator.
Hmm.
They were able to just basically nod sometimes, and that was done.
Wow.
So some guy disrespects him or something, boom, you got two or three guys raising their hand. I'll take this guy out. I
Wow.
mean, uh, extremely powerful. It's
Right.
really
Right.
hard to
Right.
understand. And a lot of people, most civilians are saying that, and that's something good. Well, in their world, it is. That's everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, there's well, men always form a hierarchy, whether it's the underworld or whether it's the business world or the military. It always comes down. Have you ever seen women being snuck in or women's guards actually being involved with the heavy hitter shot calls, in a romantic way or anything like that?
Not that I didn't report. So, you know,
Okay.
uh, there's a thing a lot of them say, hey, a lot of convicts on my show, they'll say, you guys always, cover each other's asses. No, if I saw something that was wrong and I knew it was wrong, I reported it. And I think
Hmm.
most officers did. Now, whether anything happened or not, that's a different story because you got
Right.
like unions or Unfortunately, sometimes they will protect the corrupt cops as well as the cops are being abused by the administration. So that's
Mm-hmm.
the pros and cons. We talked about that about everything. The pros and cons of unions
Mm-hmm.
is they do prevent abuse by administrators or jerks, overbearing, trying to abuse their authority, but
Mm-hmm.
they also, unfortunately, sometimes protect those that small percentage who are corrupt, who
Mm-hmm.
are bad cops, who get their jollies off of beating down inmates in handcuffs, that kind of thing.
Right, right, right.
So, so yeah, I've seen it. I've more heard of it or
Mm-hmm.
read about it. Hey, so and so got walked out. Like, oh, what happened to them? Oh, they got caught by investigations for bringing in, drugs or whatever, or having sex or
Right,
whatever.
right, 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 right.
So that does happen,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, but it's not a common occurrence as much as some people, or especially convicts, might think it is. In the same token, it's interesting to me that a lot of cops and corrections officers or guards, as some of them prefer to be called, will say that all inmates are scumbags. They're all pieces of shit. They just really talk bad about them, and I'm like, most of them I get along. I've
Yeah,
had some of them on my show. I've met them out in the streets. I've been with my family sometimes. And don't get me wrong, I've been worried sometimes because I wasn't packing or something, just wrong place, wrong time, no escape route. But every single time they came up and shook my hand and said, "Thank you, Mr. Morales. You treated me like a man." Or you looked out for me when nobody else was.
right,
And it wasn't anything I gave them that they didn't have coming. It's
right.
just, other people ignored them, and I said, okay, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah,
And sometimes it happened, and they never forgot that. So yeah, I believe that basically most people are good. Some people made some really bad decisions. Like I said, I could have made a bad decision. I could have shot those guys and been in prison and just getting out now.
right, right,
That could
right,
have
right.
happened to me. And I tell them that could have happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
I know how easy it is to get caught up.
Right.
But hopefully, from watching this show and watching my show and other podcasts, that
Mm-hmm.
some people learn from them. Like I said, that they uh, definitely, especially some of the younger ones, it's like, oh, I can't wait. It's like you can tell from their comments, I can't wait to get the president in jail. It sounds exciting. No, I
Oh
tell them, you know
yeah.
what? These guys complain all day. All day they complain about how the food sucks, how they're always getting messed with. They're told when to get up, when they got to go to bed, when they can take a shower. They can't do what they want. They can't eat what they want. They can't make love to their
Woman.
loved one, except maybe if they get a boneyard visit every once in a while,
Yeah,
conjugal visit. And all the things that you love in life and taken for granted, they're not going to be there.
it's
It
gone.
sucks.
Yeah,
So yeah, unfortunately, especially some young people, they kind of they're like, yeah, I'd love that respect. I'd love people to just bow down to me and everything, but that's really not uh, something that I think most people hopefully will strive for. They'll see that there's a lot more in life than just that, just ego, my
right.
power, my control. Um, and yeah, hopefully people enjoyed this show. Hopefully they read that book. And
Yes.
thank you for having me on the show.
Of course. But what is your podcast? What's the name of your podcast?
It's called Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.
Gangsters, cops, and politicians. I'm going to make sure that that is in the um, description so people could just click and go. And it's available on YouTube and what other platforms?
It it shows on YouTube. My book is available on Amazon.com and other platforms,
Okay,
but
here is
most
the book.
people order through Amazon.
Yeah, I'm also going to have that link, the Amazon link, because that's where I bought it. And the book is The History of the Aryan Brotherhood. Go and buy it. It is a great read. And you're also have other books available too. I mean, you did a book on the Mexican Mafia, and you're working on a new book. So definitely want to have you back, sir. And all the love and respect to you. I really appreciate you coming on and doing this interview with me because it was a tremendous, tremendous interview. Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, we'll talk soon.
All right. Take care.
All right, bye bye.